Steve Rotheram.
Can I congratulate the member for Milton Keynes South on his maiden speech, a Scotsman supporting England, eh? Forgive me, Mr. Speaker, if I stumble over the proprieties peculiar to the House. Not my words, but the opening salvo in the maiden speech from my predecessor on the 24th of July 1991, more from whom I will cite later. Such observations are as true today as they were 19 years ago. Although I've only been in this place for a few short weeks, I've already started to take notice of the vagaries of this House. For example, I've noted that when a member begins a speech with the words, "I will be brief," it is a certainty that an extensive and loquacious contribution is guaranteed. Similarly, when the words, "This doesn't really need saying," are uttered, it's odds on that an explanation of what it was that didn't need saying is then explained in some detail to those that didn't need it explaining to in the first place. Mr. Speaker, you may well be able to have discerned from my accent, if not my haircut, that I'm from the home of John, Paul, George and Ringo. But also Jerry Marsden, The Farm and China Crisis, to unashamedly mention just a few of my personal friends. Liverpool boasts too many politicians, musicians, comedians, poets, broadcasters, artists, etc., to mention individually. Otherwise, my maiden speech may well have been one of the longest ever recorded. You can also find a Scouser at every level of our armed forces, and one of my constituents, Craig Lundberg, who was blinded in an attack by insurgents in Iraq, is an inspiration to others, and I, like many members on all benches previously, would like to pay tribute to all our armed forces who carry out such dangerous and commendable work on behalf of us all. I represent a constituency that uniquely boasts two Premiership football clubs within its boundary. In our football-mad city, the achievements of Everton and Liverpool have a direct effect on the fortunes of our city, and historically, we have been no stranger to on-field success. However, for one of our clubs, it is now fortunes of the financial kind that threaten its very existence, and I urge members to sign the early day motion 197 on this issue, as the Minister previously refused my request for a meeting with RBS. I should perhaps declare at this point that I am a dyed-in-the-wool Liverpool fan and a season ticket holder at Anfield, but I would honestly say the same things if it was Everton FC that had been the victim of a leveraged buyout that endangered its future survival and which has caused so many problems for my constituents living in close proximity to the football stadium. England's most successful football club is slowly being drained by the greed of two American asset strippers, and this is having a negative impact on regeneration projects for the whole area. Unfortunately, the beautiful game does not always attract those with beautiful intentions. One of the great socialist philosophers of the last century, the great Bill Shankly, may have been mistaken when he said that football was more important than life and death. But supporters of both of our sporting institutions at least understood his passion, and they won't stand idly by without being engaged in the future of their respective football clubs. The reason that Mr. Shankly was uncharacteristically wrong is that our city, unfortunately, recognises more than most the life and death results of poor stadium safety and ineffective policing, a primary cause of the tragedies at Heysel and Hillsborough. And I can assure my constituents that I will campaign on their behalf against any plans to water down ground safety standards, and I will fight tooth and nail to protect the inquiry set up to examine the Hillsborough disaster. And I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, the member for Lee, on behalf of all the Hillsborough families for pushing so hard to get the process started. Mr. Speaker, my predecessor may have been from the blue half of Merseyside, but he was certainly from the political red half of this chamber, and I know it's traditional for members making their maiden speeches to highlight the contribution of their predecessor. Some are faced with the unenviable task of waxing lyrical about a political opponent they may well have recently put to the electoral sword. Others may have replaced a colleague in controversial circumstances, while some may have actually been complicit in their predecessor's downfall. I'm pleased to say that none of these scenarios apply in my case. Put quite simply, I wouldn't be in this place without the support, encouragement and friendship of Peter Kilfoyle. Peter will go down as one of the great parliamentarians, widely respected on all sides of the chamber, despite, or maybe due to, the fact that he was independent of mind and voted with his conscience, sometimes controversially, like on the issue of Iraq, but also on his spirited opposition to the scrapping of the 10p tax rate. Looking back, Mr. Speaker, Peter's opposition to the Iraq War was not met with universal support on the Labour benches at the time, but it does appear that some of my right honourable friends in the race for the Labour leadership are also now expressing their reservations at that particular policy. And as coalition members will find out, hindsight is a wonderful thing. In a world of political self-aggrandisement, Peter Kilfoyle sacrificed career advancement for ideological principle. It is refreshing that there are still men and women whose moral judgment and values override the dangled carrot of elevated office. I can only aspire to follow in Peter's footsteps. He dedicated 19 years to the service of this House and to that of his constituents in Liverpool Walton. Peter achieved his aim of doing justice to his predecessor, the late Eric Heffer, who gave 27 years to the same cause, and therefore I know I've got my work cut out to follow two such political giants. And I wish Peter's lovely wife Bernie all the very best in coming to terms with having him under her feet 24/7. It is an unbelievable privilege to have been elected by the people of the area where I've lived all of my married life, and I am delighted to represent them in this place, and I do not intend to let them down. I am proud to be a Scouser and to represent Walton, where my mum was born. One of the best things, Mr. Speaker, about making my maiden speech is that my mum's name, Dorothy Rotheram, will now be recorded in Hansard in perpetuity. Mr. Speaker, I thought I'd actually got something in common with the Prime Minister when somebody mentioned the other day that he too had been brought up on an estate. But upon further examination, it was pointed out that the estate wasn't that similar to ours after all. I make no apology for stating on the record that I intend to be a strong voice for the people who elected me to the safest seat in the country and for the city I love. And I plan to be a constant thorn in the side of the present government to ensure that Liverpool is not disproportionately affected by funding cuts, just as it was the last time Tories sat on the benches opposite. Mr. Deputy Speaker, both of my predecessors had connections with the construction sector, and I am therefore delighted to keep up that tradition. I'm guessing, but I'm probably one of only a tiny minority of people in this chamber who have actually completed an apprenticeship. I started my working life as an apprentice bricklayer, and my son Stephen is an apprentice electrician, and I am passionate about the building industry and of apprenticeships. The last Labour government breathed new life into apprenticeships that had all but been killed off by the last Conservative government. A high-skilled economy is not just about graduates, and therefore I welcome the road to Damascus conversion by the government, and I will campaign for parity of esteem between vocational and academic training routes. As a serving Liverpool councillor, I would like to put on record my congratulations to Councillor Joe Anderson and my colleagues, and wish them all the very best in the months ahead. Mr. Speaker, my predecessor concluded his maiden speech by highlighting to the then Conservative government that unless it took steps to tackle the social issues of the day, the government would not be forgiven. Coalition members on the benches opposite should take heed to such lessons from history.